May 15, 1966. Da Nang Sniper School, South Vietnam. The jungle humidity hung thick as Marines loaded their rifles for final inspection. Standard-issue M40s with Redfield scopes gleamed under the canvas shelter. Military precision, military doctrine, military superiority. Then Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Hathcock stepped forward with something that made his fellow Marines laugh out loud. A Winchester Model 70, a civilian hunting rifle. The kind of weapon weekend deer hunters carried through Pennsylvania woods, not what professional killers used in the most dangerous war zone on Earth. "That's not a sniper rifle," one Marine whispered. "That's what my dad uses for elk hunting." The mockery rippled through the ranks. Here was this quiet sergeant from Arkansas, claiming he could outshoot trained military snipers with a glorified deer gun. A 30-06 bolt-action with an 8-power scope that belonged in a sporting goods store, not a combat zone. 24 hours later, 7 Viet Cong snipers would be dead, and nobody would ever mock that civilian rifle again. The morning sun cut through the triple canopy jungle like molten copper, casting long shadows across the makeshift firing range at Da Nang Marine Base. Carlos Hathcock adjusted the leather sling on his Winchester Model 70, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle that had taken more white-tailed deer in Arkansas than he cared to count. Around him, 23 other Marines clutched their newly issued M40 sniper rifles, the military's answer to precision shooting in Vietnam. The Remington 700 actions gleamed with fresh Parkerizing, topped with Redfield AccuRange scopes that cost the taxpayers more than most enlisted men made in 2 months. Staff Sergeant Mitchell Torres walked the line, inspecting each weapon with the methodical precision of a man who had seen too many Marines die because their equipment failed when it mattered most. He paused at each station, checking scope mounts, testing bolt action, ensuring that every rifle met the exacting standards that separated snipers from riflemen. When he reached Hathcock's position, his weathered face creased into a frown that had become legendary among Marine recruits. "Sergeant Hathcock," Torres said, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years in the Corps. "What exactly do you call this piece of sporting goods store inventory?" The question hung in the humid air like cordite smoke. Conversations died along the firing line as 23 pairs of eyes turned toward the quiet Marine from Little Rock. Hathcock's hands remained steady on his rifle, his pale blue eyes meeting Torres's stare without flinching. "Winchester Model 70, Staff Sergeant, chambered in 30-06 Springfield, 8-power unearthal scope with target knobs." A snort of laughter erupted from Lance Corporal Danny Rodriguez 3 positions down the line. "My uncle uses one just like that for hunting mule deer back in Colorado. You planning to bag Bambi out there, Hathcock?" The laughter spread like wildfire through the group. These were Marines who had survived boot camp at Paris Island, infantry training at Camp Lejeune, and 3 weeks of the most demanding marksmanship training the Corps could devise. They carried rifles that cost $800 each, precision instruments designed specifically for killing human beings at distances that would make a deer hunter's head spin. The idea that one of their number would trust his life to a civilian hunting rifle struck them as either insane or supremely arrogant. Torres held up a hand, silencing the chatter with a gesture that brooked no argument. "The weapon was approved by Colonel Morrison himself," he said, though his tone suggested he questioned the colonel's judgment. "The Winchester platform has proven accuracy in civilian competitions. The 30-06 cartridge delivers adequate terminal ballistics at range." He paused, studying Hathcock's impassive face. "But this isn't a target range in Arkansas, son. This is Vietnam. Charlie doesn't give you a second chance because your daddy's deer rifle jammed." Hathcock nodded slowly, understanding the weight behind the staff sergeant's words. Every Marine in the program had volunteered for sniper training, but volunteer work in Vietnam meant stepping forward to paint a target on your back. Enemy forces had learned to fear American marksmen, and they responded by fielding their own snipers, specifically trained to hunt the hunters. The average life expectancy of a sniper in Vietnam hovered somewhere between 5 weeks and never seeing home again. "I understand, Staff Sergeant," Hathcock said quietly. but I've put more rounds through this rifle than some Marines put through their M14s in basic training. I know exactly where it shoots at every range from 100 to 800 yards. I know how the barrel heats up, how the action cycles, how the trigger breaks." He ran his thumb along the rifle's stock, worn smooth by countless hours of practice. "In my hands, this rifle shoots half-minute groups at 300 yards, every time." The claim drew more skeptical murmurs from the other Marines. Half-minute accuracy meant hitting a 1.5-inch circle at 300 yards, the kind of precision that separated expert marksmen from weekend plinkers. Most military rifles achieve 2-minute accuracy on their best days, and that was with match-grade ammunition under perfect conditions. Torres studied the rifle more carefully, noting the custom trigger work, the carefully bedded action, the scope mounted with precision rings that spoke of countless hours of meticulous adjustment. This wasn't just any hunting rifle pulled off a sporting goods shelf. This was a weapon that had been refined through thousands of rounds of careful practice, tuned to its owner's specifications with the kind of obsessive attention that created truly dangerous marksmen. "We'll see," Torres said, finally. "First mission brief is at 1400 hours. You'll be paired with Corporal Anderson for forward observation duties." He moved on to the next Marine, but not before adding, "I hope your confidence in that civilian rifle extends to trusting it with your life and Anderson's." The afternoon briefing took place in a sweltering Quonset hut where maps of the I-Corps tactical zone covered every available wall surface. Intelligence reports painted a picture of enemy sniper activity that had claimed 7 Marine casualties in the past 2 weeks alone. North Vietnamese regulars and Viet Cong guerrillas had established observation posts in the dense jungle west of Da Nang, positions that allowed them to monitor Marine patrol routes and call in mortar attacks on vulnerable units. Captain James Mackenzie, the sniper program commander, traced a red line across the map with his finger. "Your target area covers approximately 12 square kilometers of triple canopy jungle. Intelligence suggests at least 2 enemy sniper teams operating in this sector, possibly more. Your mission is reconnaissance and interdiction. Find them before they find any more of our people." Hathcock studied the terrain features on the map, noting elevation changes, stream beds, and potential hide sites that might appeal to enemy marksmen. The jungle offered countless places for a skilled sniper to disappear, but it also created natural choke points where patient hunters could intercept their prey. His Winchester felt familiar and reassuring against his shoulder as he visualized the mission parameters. As the briefing concluded and Marines filed out to prepare their equipment, Torres approached Hathcock once more. "Son," he said quietly, "I've been training snipers for 3 years. I've seen good Marines die because they trusted equipment that failed them when the chips were down. That hunting rifle of yours might shoot pretty groups at the range, but combat has a way of testing equipment in ways you can't practice for." Hathcock met the Staff Sergeant's eyes without wavering. "I appreciate your concern, Staff Sergeant, but tomorrow morning, we'll both know whether this civilian rifle can do the job." Within 18 hours, 7 enemy snipers would provide that answer in the most definitive way possible. Dawn came to the Vietnamese jungle like a predator stalking its prey, filtering through layers of vegetation that turned morning light into a green-tinted twilight. Hathcock moved through the elephant grass with the deliberate care of a man who understood that survival depended on becoming invisible. Behind him, Corporal John Anderson matched his pace, carrying the M49 spotting scope and radio that would connect them to the world beyond the jungle's suffocating embrace. The Winchester Model 70 felt balanced and familiar across Hathcock's back, its leather sling darkened with sweat and humidity. They had been moving for 3 hours since leaving the forward operating base, following game trails that wound through terrain so dense that visibility rarely extended beyond 50 meters. The air hung thick with the smell of rotting vegetation and the metallic tang of morning dew on metal equipment. Every step required careful placement to avoid the snap of branches or rustle of leaves that might alert enemy ears to their presence. Anderson had initially questioned the pace, accustomed to the faster movement of regular infantry patrols, but Hathcock's whispered explanation had been simple and convincing. Dead snipers moved fast. Live snipers moved invisible. The intelligence briefing had identified a ridgeline approximately 4 kilometers west of their starting position where enemy sniper activity had been most concentrated. Marine patrols reported muzzle flashes from elevated positions that commanded excellent fields of fire over the valley approaches to Da Nang. 2 Marines had died in the past week, both killed by single rifle shots that suggested trained marksmen rather than the spray-and-pray tactics of typical Viet Cong ambushes. The mission parameters were straightforward in concept but deadly in execution. Locate, identify, and eliminate enemy snipers before they could claim more American lives. Hathcock called a halt at the base of the target ridge, studying the terrain through his binoculars with the methodical patience that would become his trademark. The slopes rose nearly 200 meters above their position, covered in dense jungle, broken by occasional rocky outcroppings that offered natural shooting positions. Any one of a dozen locations could conceal enemy marksmen, but Hathcock's experienced eye identified 3 spots that combined excellent fields of fire with multiple escape routes. Professional snipers, like their American counterparts, preferred positions that offered tactical advantages without becoming death traps. Anderson set up the spotting scope on its lightweight tripod, adjusting the 20-power magnification to scan the ridgeline for signs of enemy activity. The morning sun had begun to heat the jungle floor, creating thermal updrafts that made long-range observation challenging through the wavering air. Still, both Marines had learned to read the subtle signs that distinguished natural jungle movement from human activity. A branch that swayed against the prevailing breeze, shadows that fell at angles inconsistent with the sun's position, the brief glint of metal or glass that reflected light in directions where none should exist. The first sign of enemy presence came at 0830 hours, when Anderson's sharp eyes caught movement on a rocky ledge approximately 600 meters up the slope. "Movement. 2 o'clock. Range 600, he whispered into Hathcock's ear, using the standard spotting protocol that had been drilled into both men during their training. Hathcock adjusted his position behind the Winchester, settling into a shooting posture that distributed his weight evenly and minimized the effects of muscle fatigue on his accuracy. Through his 8-power unearthal scope, Hathcock could make out the outline of what appeared to be a carefully constructed hide made from local vegetation. The position commanded an excellent view of the valley floor below, where Marine patrols frequently moved along established routes. Inside the hide, barely visible through gaps in the camouflage, he could detect the distinctive outline of a rifle barrel and the subtle movement that indicated human occupancy. The enemy sniper had chosen his position well, but professional training had taught Hathcock to look beyond the obvious and identify the details that separated professionals from amateurs. The range to target measured exactly 587 meters, according to Anderson's laser rangefinder, well within the effective range of the .30-06 cartridge, but requiring careful calculation of wind drift and bullet drop. Hathcock noted the direction of smoke from a distant cooking fire that indicated wind speed and direction at approximately 7 miles per hour from the southwest. The Winchester's ballistics tables, memorized through countless hours of practice, told him that his 168 grain match bullets would drop approximately 36 inches at that range and drift roughly 8 inches in the prevailing wind. As Hathcock made his firing calculations, Anderson continued scanning the ridgeline through his spotting scope, searching for additional targets that might reveal themselves once the first shot was fired. Professional snipers rarely operated alone, and intelligence reports suggested that North Vietnamese sniper teams typically consisted of 2 to 4 marksmen working in coordinated pairs. The first rule of counter-sniper operations was simple: expect company and be prepared to engage multiple targets in rapid succession. The enemy sniper made his fatal mistake at 0915 hours, when he adjusted his position to track movement in the valley below. The slight movement exposed enough of his profile for Hathcock to identify a clear aiming point just below the enemy's left shoulder blade, a shot placement that would penetrate vital organs and prevent return fire. Hathcock's breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm he had perfected through thousands of practice rounds, his finger taking up the slack in the Winchester's crisp trigger pull. The rifle's report echoed across the jungle like thunder, the 168 grain bullet crossing the distance to target in less than 0.6 of a second. Through his scope, Hathcock watched the enemy sniper's body jerk backward before disappearing into the vegetation behind his hide. Anderson confirmed the hit through his spotting scope, but both Marines remained motionless, scanning for additional threats that might reveal themselves in response to the gunshot. They didn't have to wait long. Within 30 seconds of Hathcock's first shot, muzzle flashes erupted from 2 additional positions on the ridgeline as enemy snipers attempted to locate and engage the American marksman. The hasty shots went wide, impacting harmlessly in the jungle floor 50 meters to their left, but the flashes revealed the precise locations of 2 more enemy positions. Hathcock worked the Winchester's bolt smoothly, chambering a fresh cartridge while Anderson called out range and wind corrections for the new targets. The second shot came 2 minutes later, targeted at an enemy sniper who had exposed himself while attempting to maneuver to a better firing position. The bullet struck center mass at a range of 420 meters, dropping the enemy marksman instantly. The third target, recognizing the deadly accuracy of the American sniper, attempted to withdraw from his position but made the mistake of silhouetting himself against the sky as he moved along the ridgeline. Hathcock's third shot took him at a range of nearly 700 meters, the longest shot he had ever attempted under combat conditions. The jungle fell silent except for the normal sounds of insects and bird calls that gradually resumed as the echoes of gunfire faded. Anderson continued scanning through his spotting scope, searching for additional targets, but the ridgeline showed no further signs of enemy activity. 3 enemy snipers lay dead, eliminated by precise rifle fire from a civilian hunting rifle that had been mocked as inadequate for military service less than 24 hours earlier. As they prepared to change positions and continue their patrol, Anderson looked at Hathcock with something approaching awe. "That Winchester of yours shoots pretty good for a deer rifle," he said quietly. Hathcock smiled grimly as he checked his remaining ammunition and prepared to move to their next observation point. The morning was still young, and intelligence suggested at least 4 more enemy snipers remained active in their assigned sector. His civilian rifle had proven itself capable of precision work at combat ranges, but the real test would come when the enemy learned to fear the quiet Marine with the hunting rifle and began to hunt him in return. Word traveled fast through the enemy intelligence networks that honeycombed the Vietnamese jungle like underground rivers. Within 72 hours of Hathcock's first mission, North Vietnamese army commanders in the DMZ region had received detailed reports of an American sniper whose accuracy exceeded anything their forces had encountered. The quiet Marine with the hunting rifle had eliminated 7 confirmed enemy marksmen in 3 separate engagements, using a weapon that Vietnamese observers described as a civilian sporting rifle rather than military hardware. The implications were troubling enough that Colonel Nguyen Van Hoa, commander of the 324th NVA Division's Reconnaissance Battalion, issued specific orders regarding the American sniper who had earned the nickname Long Tra Rang among enemy forces, meaning white feather, in reference to the distinctive plume Hathcock wore in his bush hat. Hathcock learned of his growing reputation through intelligence reports that filtered back from captured documents and prisoner interrogations. Enemy forces had placed a bounty of $30,000 on his head, an enormous sum by Vietnamese standards that reflected both his effectiveness and the psychological impact his precision shooting was having on enemy morale. More concerning was evidence that specialized sniper teams were being deployed specifically to hunt him. Marksmen trained in the Soviet Union and North Korea who carried precision rifles and had been briefed on American sniper tactics through detailed analysis of his operational patterns. The counterattack came on the morning of June 3, 1967, as Hathcock and Anderson moved through dense jungle near the Ben Hai River, approximately 8 kilometers south of the DMZ. Their mission involved establishing observation posts to monitor enemy infiltration routes that intelligence believed were being used to move weapons and personnel south toward Da Nang. The terrain offered excellent concealment but limited fields of fire, forcing the American snipers to work closer to potential enemy positions than either man preferred. Anderson had been scanning their back trail through binoculars when he spotted movement that made his blood freeze. "Carlos," he whispered, using Hathcock's first name in violation of military protocol, but reflecting the bond that developed between men who depended on each other for survival. "We've got company. 300 meters back, moving parallel to our route." Hathcock immediately shifted to a defensive posture, using his riflescope to scan the vegetation behind their position. Through the 8-power magnification, he could detect subtle signs of human movement that suggested at least 2 individuals following their trail with the practiced stealth of professional hunters. The pursuers moved with discipline that ruled out typical Viet Cong guerrillas, exhibiting the kind of tactical patience that characterized elite reconnaissance units or specialized sniper teams. The cat-and-mouse game that followed tested every skill Hathcock had developed during his years of hunting in the Arkansas woods. He led Anderson through a series of evasive maneuvers designed to break contact with their pursuers while creating opportunities to identify and engage the enemy hunters. They moved through stream beds to mask their trail, used fallen logs and rocky outcroppings to break up their silhouettes, and employed every concealment technique in the sniper's handbook to maintain their advantage of invisibility. The enemy team proved equally skilled, matching Hathcock's tactical movements with countermoves that suggested extensive training in anti-sniper operations. They maintained contact without closing distance, using natural terrain features to mask their approach while keeping the Americans under observation. The psychological pressure was immense, knowing that somewhere behind them moved marksmen whose sole mission was to eliminate the white feather before he could claim more enemy lives. The decisive moment came when Hathcock made a calculated decision that went against every principle of sniper doctrine he had been taught. Rather than continuing to evade, he chose to reverse roles and become the hunter. Using hand signals, he directed Anderson to continue moving along their original route while he doubled back through dense undergrowth to establish an ambush position overlooking the trail they had just vacated. The Winchester Model 70 felt reassuring in his hands as he settled into a shooting position behind a fallen mahogany tree that offered both concealment and a clear field of fire. The first enemy sniper appeared 30 minutes later, moving with the careful precision of a man who understood that death waited in the jungle shadows. Through his scope, Hathcock could see that the enemy marksman carried a Soviet-manufactured Mosin Nagant rifle, topped with a PSO scope, standard equipment for NVA sniper units. The enemy wore the mottled green uniform of North Vietnamese regulars rather than the black pajamas of Viet Cong guerrillas, confirming intelligence reports about the deployment of elite units to counter American sniper operations. At a range of 240 meters, the shot was well within the Winchester's capabilities, but Hathcock waited for the optimal moment when the target would be stationary and clearly exposed. The enemy sniper obliged by stopping to examine tracks in the soft earth, presenting a perfect profile shot that Hathcock took without hesitation. The 168-grain bullet struck center mass, dropping the enemy marksman instantly. The second pursuer reacted with professional discipline, immediately seeking cover while attempting to locate the source of the gunshot that had killed his partner. Hathcock remained motionless in his hide, knowing that movement would reveal his position to an enemy who was undoubtedly scanning the jungle through his own rifle scope. The standoff lasted 20 minutes before the surviving enemy sniper made the fatal mistake of trying to reach his fallen comrade's position to retrieve the radio that would call for reinforcement. The movement exposed him to Hathcock's crosshairs at a range of 180 meters, close enough that the Winchester's deadly accuracy left no room for error. The second shot ended the immediate threat, but Hathcock knew that eliminating 2 members of an enemy sniper team would only escalate the deadly game being played in the Vietnamese jungle. As he rejoined Anderson and they resumed their patrol, radio intercepts picked up by Marine intelligence units confirmed that enemy forces were now dedicating significant resources to hunting the white feather. Multiple sniper teams were being deployed throughout E-Corps, each equipped with detailed intelligence about Hathcock's operational methods and armed with specific orders to eliminate him at any cost. The quiet Marine with the civilian hunting rifle had become the most hunted man in Vietnam, a target whose elimination had become a matter of national priority for North Vietnamese military commanders. The psychological war had begun in earnest. Enemy propaganda broadcasts mentioned the white feather by name, describing him as a symbol of American imperialism that needed to be destroyed to demonstrate Vietnamese resolve. Marine intelligence estimated that at least 12 specialized sniper teams were operating in sectors where Hathcock might be deployed, each consisting of marksmen trained specifically to counter American sniper tactics. Anderson studied his partner's calm demeanor as they moved through the jungle toward their next objective. "You realize they're going to keep coming until they get you," he said quietly. Hathcock adjusted the white feather in his bush hat, a gesture that had become his trademark, despite repeated warnings from superiors that the distinctive marking made him an easier target for enemy snipers. "Let them come," he replied, with the quiet confidence of a man who trusted his rifle and his skills above all else. "Everyone they send after me is one less shooting at other Marines." The words would prove prophetic as the sniper war in Vietnam escalated into a deadly contest between the world's most skilled marksmen, with Carlos Hathcock's Winchester Model 70 at the center of a conflict that would redefine the role of precision shooting in modern warfare. The morning of September 17, 1967, brought with it the kind of oppressive heat that turned the Vietnamese jungle into a steam bath by 0700 hours. Hathcock and Anderson had been in position since before dawn, occupying a carefully constructed hide overlooking a valley that intelligence reports identified as a major infiltration route for North Vietnamese forces moving south toward Marine positions around Da Nang. Their mission was interdiction and reconnaissance, but both Marines understood that they were also bait in a trap designed to draw out the enemy sniper teams that had been hunting the white feather for the past 4 months. The hide itself represented 6 hours of meticulous construction, built into the base of a massive banyan tree whose extensive root system provided natural camouflage and concealment. Anderson had woven local vegetation through a framework of branches and vines, creating a position that was virtually invisible from any angle beyond 50 meters. Inside the hide, Hathcock had arranged his equipment with the obsessive attention to detail that separated professional snipers from weekend hunters. His Winchester Model 70 rested on a bipod constructed from lightweight aluminum, the rifle's scope, covers removed and lens caps secured to prevent the telltale glint of reflected sunlight that might betray their position to enemy observers. Intelligence reports suggested that a particularly skilled enemy sniper, known to Marine forces as the Cobra, had been assigned specifically to eliminate Hathcock. Vietnamese prisoners described a marksman who had trained in the Soviet Union and carried a precision rifle equipped with advanced optical equipment. More troubling were reports that the Cobra had studied detailed intelligence files on Hathcock's operational methods, learning his preferred tactics and shooting positions through careful analysis of his previous engagements. The enemy sniper had reportedly sworn an oath to kill the white feather and claim the $30,000 bounty that North Vietnamese commanders had placed on Hathcock's head. The first sign of enemy activity came at 0845 hours when Anderson detected movement approximately 800 meters across the valley. Through his 20-power spotting scope, he could make out figures moving along what appeared to be a well-used trail that wound through dense jungle towards suspected enemy base camps in the mountains beyond. The figures moved with military discipline rather than the casual gait of civilians, suggesting a combat unit rather than local villagers going about their daily business. Hathcock studied the area through his rifle scope, noting details that would help him identify potential targets and assess their military significance. The group consisted of approximately 12 individuals, all carrying weapons and equipment that identified them as North Vietnamese regulars rather than Viet Cong guerrillas. More importantly, one figure near the rear of the column carried what appeared to be a precision rifle and moved with the careful awareness of a trained sniper scanning for threats. As Hathcock watched through his 8-power unearthal scope, the enemy column halted near a rocky outcropping that offered excellent observation of the valley floor below. The figure with the precision rifle separated from the main group and began climbing toward a position that would provide commanding fields of fire over the route that Marine patrols typically used when moving through the area. The tactical situation was developing into exactly the kind of sniper duel that both men had been expecting, a deadly contest between two of the most skilled marksmen in Vietnam. The enemy sniper's position was located approximately 730 meters from Hathcock's hide, a challenging shot, but well within the capabilities of his Winchester and the match-grade ammunition he carried. Wind conditions were relatively calm, with only light breezes moving through the canopy that would have minimal effect on bullet trajectory at that range. The morning sun was behind Hathcock's position, meaning that any reflection from his scope lens would be directed away from the enemy's likely line of sight. What happened next would become one of the most famous shots in military history, though the exact details would be debated for decades by ballistics experts and military historians. Through his scope, Hathcock could see the enemy sniper settling into a shooting position behind what appeared to be a Soviet-manufactured rifle topped with a telescopic sight. The enemy marksman was scanning the valley below, searching for targets or signs of American forces that might reveal themselves through movement or muzzle flashes. The critical moment came when the enemy sniper turned his rifle toward Hathcock's general area, apparently having detected something that aroused his suspicion. Through his scope, Hathcock could see sunlight reflecting off the enemy's optical equipment, creating a brief glint that revealed the exact position of the hostile marksman. More importantly, the enemy sniper's scope was pointed directly at Hathcock's hide, suggesting that the Cobra had identified the American position and was preparing to take a shot. What followed required a level of precision that pushed the limits of both human skill and equipment capability. Hathcock's crosshairs settled on the tiny reflection coming from the enemy sniper's scope, a target roughly the size of a quarter at 730 meters. The shot would have to travel through dense, humid air that could deflect the bullet's path, over terrain that created thermal updrafts capable of affecting trajectory, and arrive with enough accuracy to strike a target smaller than most shooters could reliably hit at 100 meters. Hathcock's breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm he had perfected through thousands of practice rounds, his finger taking up the precise amount of trigger slack that would release the Winchester's firing pin without disturbing his sight picture. The rifle's report echoed across the valley like thunder, the 168 grain match bullet leaving the muzzle at 2,700 feet per second and crossing the distance to target in just over 0.8 of a second. Through his scope, Hathcock watched as the enemy sniper's body jerked backward and disappeared behind the rocky outcropping where he had been positioned. Anderson, observing through his spotting scope, confirmed that the bullet had struck exactly where Hathcock had aimed, penetrating the enemy sniper's telescopic sight and continuing into his skull with devastating effect. The shot had not only eliminated a dangerous enemy marksman, but had done so in a manner that demonstrated precision shooting at its absolute finest. The significance of the shot extended far beyond the elimination of a single enemy sniper. Ballistics experts who later examined the enemy rifle recovered from the position determined that Hathcock's bullet had traveled the entire length of the enemy's telescopic sight, entering through the objective lens and exiting through the eyepiece before striking the sniper's eye. The feat required not only extraordinary marksmanship, but also perfect timing, as the enemy scope had to be aligned precisely with Hathcock's position at the moment of bullet impact. Word of the shot spread through Marine units across I Corps like wildfire, becoming the kind of legend that soldiers told and retold until the details took on near mythical proportions. Enemy forces also learned of their champion's death, and the psychological impact proved as significant as the tactical victory. The Cobra had been considered invincible by North Vietnamese forces, a marksman whose skills were legendary even among elite sniper units. His elimination by the White Feather's civilian hunting rifle sent shockwaves through enemy command structures and reinforced Hathcock's growing reputation as an unstoppable force. As Hathcock and Anderson prepared to evacuate their position and return to base, both men understood that they had participated in something that would be remembered long after the Vietnam War ended. The shot through the enemy sniper's scope had demonstrated the ultimate effectiveness of precision marksmanship and proven that the Winchester Model 70, mocked as a civilian hunting rifle, could achieve levels of accuracy that redefined what was possible in combat shooting. The evacuation helicopter descended through the morning haze like a mechanical angel, its rotor wash flattening the elephant grass around landing zone Charlie as medics rushed forward with stretchers and plasma bags. September 27, 1967, would mark the end of Carlos Hathcock's active sniper operations in Vietnam, though not by choice. The improvised explosive device that had detonated beneath his LVTP-5 armored personnel carrier 3 days earlier had left him with burns covering 30% of his body and shrapnel wounds that would require months of surgery and rehabilitation. As the medical team loaded Hathcock onto the helicopter bound for the hospital ship USS Repose, he clutched his Winchester Model 70 with hands wrapped in sterile bandages. The rifle bore scorch marks from the explosion that had nearly killed him, but its action still cycled smoothly, and the unearthal scope remained perfectly zeroed. Staff Sergeant Torres, now promoted to Gunnery Sergeant and serving as the senior sniper instructor at Da Nang, had personally ensured that the rifle accompanied Hathcock to the evacuation point, despite regulations that typically required weapons to remain with the unit. The numbers that defined Hathcock's 13-month tour in Vietnam read like something from a precision shooting competition rather than a combat record. 93 confirmed kills, each verified by a spotter and documented according to Marine Corps regulations that demanded absolute certainty before crediting a sniper with an enemy death. Intelligence estimates suggested that his actual total exceeded 300 enemy casualties, but Hathcock himself had always insisted that only confirmed kills should be counted in any official record. More significant than the raw numbers was the tactical revolution that Hathcock's methods had introduced to military operations in Vietnam. His patient approach to stalking, his emphasis on single, precisely placed shots rather than sustained fire, and his ability to operate independently for extended periods had redefined how the Marine Corps employed snipers in guerrilla warfare environments. The Winchester Model 70 had become the standard by which other sniper rifles were measured, proving that civilian hunting rifles could outperform purpose-built military weapons when placed in skilled hands. The psychological impact of Hathcock's operations extended far beyond his personal kill count. Enemy forces had dedicated enormous resources to hunting the white feather, pulling experienced snipers and reconnaissance units away from other missions to focus on eliminating a single Marine. Intelligence reports suggested that North Vietnamese commanders had established special training programs specifically designed to counter American sniper tactics, with Hathcock's methods serving as case studies in how precision shooting could disrupt entire military operations. Colonel James Mackenzie, now commanding the Marine Corps Sniper School at Quantico, Virginia, had already begun incorporating Hathcock's innovations into the official curriculum that would train future generations of military marksmen. The emphasis on fieldcraft and camouflage, the importance of ballistic calculations under varying conditions, and the mental discipline required for precision shooting under stress had become cornerstones of sniper training based directly on lessons learned from Hathcock's Vietnam experience. The Winchester Model 70 itself had undergone its own transformation from sporting rifle to military legend. Civilian gunsmiths across America reported increased demand for rifles built to Hathcock's specifications, with hunters and competitive shooters seeking to duplicate the accuracy that had made the white feather famous. Military procurement officers quietly began evaluating civilian rifles for potential adoption by sniper units, recognizing that purpose-built hunting rifles often achieved better accuracy than mass-produced military weapons. Anderson, who had served as Hathcock's spotter for most of his combat missions, found himself assigned to the Marine Corps Sniper School as an instructor specializing in observation and target identification. His first-hand experience with Hathcock's methods made him invaluable in training new sniper teams, and his detailed knowledge of the Winchester Model 70's capabilities helped establish maintenance and employment procedures for civilian rifles adapted to military use. The legend of Hathcock's shot through the enemy sniper's scope had grown beyond the confines of military circles, attracting attention from ballistics experts and firearms manufacturers who sought to understand how such precision was possible under combat conditions. Remington Arms Company had approached Hathcock about endorsing their military rifles, but he remained loyal to the Winchester platform that had served him so well in Vietnam. His response to corporate representatives was characteristically direct. The rifle didn't make the shooter, but the right rifle in trained hands could achieve remarkable things. Medical evaluations at the Naval Hospital in Da Nang revealed that Hathcock's injuries would prevent him from returning to combat operations, though his knowledge and experience made him invaluable as an instructor and tactician. The burns on his hands had damaged nerve endings that would affect his ability to maintain the steady grip essential for precision shooting, and shrapnel wounds in his back caused chronic pain that could compromise the motionless patience required for effective sniping. Despite his physical limitations, Hathcock's influence on military sniping continued to expand as the Vietnam War progressed. His tactical innovations were studied and adopted by special operations units throughout Southeast Asia, and his emphasis on quality over quantity in sniper employment became standard doctrine. The civilian rifle that had been mocked as inadequate for military service had proven itself capable of changing the entire nature of precision shooting in modern warfare. Letters from fellow Marines reached Hathcock during his recovery, describing how enemy forces had modified their own tactics in response to the threat posed by American snipers. North Vietnamese units now moved primarily at night, used elaborate camouflage and deception measures, and employed counter-sniper teams as standard elements of their military operations. The psychological impact of knowing that American marksmen with hunting rifles could eliminate targets at ranges exceeding 800 meters had fundamentally altered how enemy forces planned and executed their operations. The transformation of the Winchester Model 70 from hunting rifle to military legend represented more than just the success of one exceptional marksman. It demonstrated that innovation in warfare often came not from advanced technology or massive resources, but from individuals willing to challenge conventional wisdom and adapt available tools to meet new challenges. Hathcock's quiet confidence in his civilian rifle had overcome the skepticism of military doctrine and proven that effectiveness mattered more than official approval. As the hospital ship USS Repose steamed toward medical facilities in Japan, Hathcock spent his time cleaning and maintaining the Winchester that had made him famous. The ritual of field stripping the rifle, checking each component for damage or wear, and reassembling the weapon with practiced precision provided both physical therapy for his injured hands and psychological comfort during the difficult process of leaving Vietnam behind. The rifle that had been mocked as a civilian hunting rifle had earned its place in military history, and Carlos Hathcock had proven that sometimes the most unlikely weapons could achieve the most extraordinary results.